Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Read and Reread. I am Angelia, and it's time for Friday Reads on November 3rd. Yes, we are into November already, believe it or not. And it's starting out very well. I was looking at the books that I have to talk about today, and at first it was one of those weeks where I was like, there's not a lot here to say. I only finished this one book, and I'm reading this other book, but then I thought about all the different things I wanted to mention, and actually I had plenty to say. Go get a snack and get ready for all the chit chat. So first of all, TV, same stuff. Morning show, which is absolutely absurd but addictive. The baking show, which is delightful, and Bosch Legacy. And then we got sidetracked completely by the World Series, but the Texas Rangers won. So yay. And so now a whole bunch of time has opened back up. And I am very unsportsy. I am good for like bits and pieces, but I actually did watch a fair amount of this because I just got caught up in it and it was fun. But it's done now. They won. Yay. So now we can move on and have more reading time. So one thing I do want to mention that is coming up on Monday, I'm going to be a guest on the BookTube show Monday Night Live with Alan and Greg. It's Alan from Big Hard Books and Classics and Greg from Another Bibliophile Reads. They have, if you haven't seen it, they do a live show on Monday nights and they invite different booktubers to come on and they invited me. So I'm so delighted. And I have never done a BookTube live. I'm trying not to have like PTSD from doing Google Meets during COVID before I retired and all the trying to teach lessons on Google Meets. But so technically this will be something new for me to try, but I'm very excited about it. And I will put their channels down below. And when the little preview thing comes up for it, I'll also put it in the community post. But I am very much looking forward to that event on Monday evening. I don't know the exact time, so watch for the community post. Also on Tuesday, I'm going to do a Remember December video. You may have seen that topic starting to swirl around, and I will save all my comments about that, but that theme is coming up in December, and I am really jazzed. That is so up my alley, of course. If you just, read and reread. But it's all about rereading books. And so I'm going to do a video about my Remember December plans and my December in general rereading habits and stories that I like to read every year. So that's Tuesday. But what are we going to talk about right now? Well, I have finished just one novel this week. And if you're only going to read one book, this would be the one because A Plague of Doves was outstanding. It started out good and then it just built and built and it built up and it built deep. The layers, oh my gosh, this book. And now I'm even madder that I had this book on my TBR for 15 long, pointless years because I'm thinking about what I did read. I read a number of other books by Louise Erdrich in those 15 years that I knew this was a highly recommended book. And I loved those other books. And yet they never pointed me over to this one somehow. I know that I read The Roundhouse, which has a lot of the same characters as this book, but takes place a little bit later on. Why, when I read that, did I not say, oh, you know what, I should go read The Plague of Doves? I read I love This Sentence. That was her most recent one. I read The Night Watchman, and I feel like there's probably one or two others that I have read during these ensuing years that I did not read The Plague of Doves. Oh, it was so good. Did I mention that it was good? So this takes place in North Dakota. The people in the story live in the town of Pluto, and there's an adjacent reservation. So some people live on the reservation, some people live in town. We have a collection of people. There are people that are white, that are indigenous, there's mixed race people. And we have, in this town's history, there was an incident that has rippled down and affected all the generations of people and their relationships ever since. in the early 1900s, I think it was like 1911, there was an incident in which a white family was murdered. The whole family, parents, several children, and only a small baby was spared. And the a group of young Indian men came upon the murder scene. They happened to come up to this house and find this scene, and they were unfairly targeted for the murders and lynched. And so the fallout of the crime and the misplaced vengeance has traveled through the history of these people ever since. And so you hear about that early on, and then you just kind of have to save it away because people kind of touch on it and move back from it throughout the entire novel. You get a little closer to the mystery of that as the book unfolds, and you hear all these different stories. We have several main narrators. We have Evelina, a young girl who's about 12, a girl of mixed heritage who's growing up in the town. We come back around to her several times throughout her growing up years. Sometimes it seems like she's on a smooth path. Other times she is in very rocky terrains. We also have a local tribal judge who very much wants to marry Evelina's aunt. And he's been around the town forever. And we also have a short but incredibly powerful segment of the story by a young woman named Marn, who is a white woman who at a very young age, like about 17, runs off with a boy named Billy that we have learned about in a previous section. I don't want to give too much away, but Billy starts out one way, but the path diverges and he becomes basically a kind of a evangelical cult leader. And that section, that's when the book, you move from this being a really, really compelling and interesting book to just being blown out of your seat by some of the passages of prose in Marn's section. And then even within these different narratives, there's stories inside the stories, because there's some other characters. There's Evelina's grandfather, Musham, and whose real name is Seraph. I think Musham is like a grandpa name, and his brother, Shemengwa, and their stories. And so sometimes somebody opens a letter, and the story there is another kind of a town history piece of documentation. Somebody who is briefly mentioned and perhaps in an unflattering way in one person's narrative is central in another story, and you see them in a whole different light. And every single person is compelling, interesting, for good or for bad. There's the complete range of human emotions. You know, her books can be they can rip you up pretty bad. Like The Roundhouse really is one of the most sad and devastating books. You know, if you're doing one of those Misery May lists, that book would be right up there. This one has a bigger range. There are funny parts and there are sad parts, and there, you know, it's just, and there's something in her style and her writing style that I really love, that she can just go on for quite some time in a very realistic fashion, and then all of a sudden there's just a paragraph. And I mean, the easiest description would be magic realism, but that might give you the wrong idea, because it's not in any way does she write a fantasy novel, but it's just something will happen that is kind of beyond the boundaries of realism, like almost a transcendent thing. And it might have to do with a lightning storm. It might happen in a sex scene. It might be have to do with a flock of birds, a plague of doves. And you just stop, and then you go back and like I would read it again, put the book down for a while, read on, come back to that other part, read it again. I mean, she just floors me. And this is the kind of book when I read it that then I think back on all the books I've read recently where I've not, you know, I've liked it, but I didn't love it. I said, oh, yeah, this is pretty good. All right, this is what I liked about it, but it didn't really, you know, do anything real big to me. And then I think that was all just a waste of time when I could have been reading this. Something, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's too much. Maybe it'd be like eating too many rich desserts one after the other to read something at that level all the time. But man, this thing was a banger. It was so good. I am so mad that maybe it's good that I waited so long. And then it didn't let me down. Maybe this was exactly the right time in my life to read this book. But it was just, it was really good, and it just built up. Like at first, I mean, I knew it was good. I was enjoying it, and all these people had said, "Oh, it's so good," and I was like, "Okay, yeah, I like it. It's good." And then it just it got me. It got me. It got me. It was so good. I gotta move on now because I am lacking in verbosity or something. But I loved The Plague of Doves, and I don't care that I didn't get around to starting my next novel yet, because this is one to just kind of let it simmer there. I had to get up and go look up characters that reappeared in other books, and then I got sidetracked and I started thinking about older books by her that I need to read that have recurring characters, and I don't know. It's just a whole thing. All right, I'm also still reading Square Haunting. This is the nonfiction book I started reading first for Nonfiction November. And I'm really, really enjoying this book. I guess I'm about halfway through it. It is not a fast-paced read, so let's see where I'm at when we get around to Friday reads next week. But I have no reason to try to hurry. I'm kind of a fast reader by nature, so when I come up against a book that requires you to slow down in order to enjoy it, I have a little bit of a battle. Like, I know it's fine to slow down and really take my time, but something inside me also goes, is that all you read? Is that as far as you got? What's going on? It's like, nothing's going on. It's just a battle with my internal reading clock. This is about 5 different women who lived in Mecklenburg Square, kind of near where the Bloomsbury group would meet in London, in between the world wars. And something that happened this week, I was reading the part about the mystery author Dorothy Sayers. And I got up to a certain point and I had to stop. I'm going to have to come back to the last little piece of her segment because it started talking about the specific plots of some books that I have been intending to read. Because, all right, let me go on my side trail about Dorothy Sayers here. Well, maybe about a year ago, I heard that this book, Gaudy Night, was really excellent and kind of a cut above and beyond the rest of the Lord Peter Wimsey series because of the character Harriet Vane. But then, so I got a copy, and then I found out, oh, but wait, you have to read these other 2 books that come up to this one to get the full impact of her character. So I got the first one, Strong Poison, that introduces Harriet, and she is a young woman who is a mystery novelist, and she gets accused of murdering her boyfriend, who's a less successful writer. And Lord Peter Wimsey comes to her aid because he believes that she is innocent. And then there's a book in between, and then there's this one. So as I was reading Square Haunting, the author Franscesca Wade starts to talk about aspects of Dorothy's experience that kind of play into the creation of the character Harriet Vane, and starts specifically talks about Strong Poison. And then I realized she was getting ready to talk about the second book, and I'm like, oh no. So I skipped ahead to the next person, who is Jane Harrison in this book. And I'm going to come back to the end of the Dorothy Sayers part. But I also had to stop everything and order that second book. And now I have to tell a story. And the story is called The Time Angelia Was a Dingaling. It's actually a series. But, okay, so the name of that novel is Have His Carcass. Sounds kind of creepy. It sounded less creepy, though, for the entire last year of my life when I thought that the title of the book was Have His Carcase, because it's spelled like Carcase. The U.S. spelling of carcass is Carcass. That's the only way I've ever seen it in my life. But this book, I did not know that this other spelling of carcass was very common in the UK. So I'm thinking for a whole year, have his Carcase. Well, that's grammatically odd. And what does that mean? And I am just picturing, Lord Peter Wimsey in his jaunty little roadster, and he's got some kind of little, he's got a Carcase. It's like a little duffel bag or a little briefcase kind of thing. I don't know, it's a little traveling bag. But it still didn't make any sense. And then I'm ordering the book, and then I thought, well, what is a Carcase anyway? I'm gonna look it up. And I find out it's nothing. It's a carcass, dead animal body, a carcass. It's just an alternate spelling. So now the title is Have His Carcass, which is also, it's closer to making sense for a mystery novel, but I still don't really know what it means. But I ordered it, so we'll find out. All right, and thus concludes the latest installment of Angelia is a Ding Dong. All right, so back to Square Haunting, but I am really loving this book and the picture that it paints of the early 20th century and these women trying to live independently and pursue their scholarly ambitions or their literary ambitions within all of these chafing restrictions and slow changes and misogynistic men and men who act like they are embracing new types of liberty, but really they just want to have affairs and not really be supportive or not really recognize women as intellectual equals. They're just into the free sex part. So anyway, I have reduced it drastically. There's a whole lot more going on in here, and I will talk about it more as I get closer to the end and I have more full picture. But I have found the stories very, very interesting, and the recurring people that are threading in and out of the different ones. And it reminds me a lot of another book that I read years and years ago, but I still have it. And that was Sylvia Beach and the Lost Generation, A History of Literary Paris in the 20s and 30s. There's a lot of people that I remember. Now that I'm reading Square Haunting, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember her, Breyer and I don't know, some of the other people that are actually play a really important role in both of these books that I feel like I'm kind of reconnecting with old friends that I hadn't thought about in a long time. Okay, so that's what's going on. I'm going to continue reading Square Haunting, but I'm ready to start another book, and here's what I have in mind. I think for sort of a palette of the mind cleanser, I think I'm going to read Messy Roots, which is a graphic memoir, and I normally would not read two nonfiction books at the same time, but this is such a different format, and it's in a narrative style, and it seems like it's kind of calling to me that I would enjoy reading it today and tomorrow possibly. And then I want to get into Maurice, which is the Forster read-along final novel that we're going to read. I have my bookmark already set in the part where Maurice begins in this kind of 3 novels in one book. So that's it. That's all. Let me know what's going on with you this week, and I hope that you have an excellent reading weekend. I will talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.